death was an accident. They said that he self-administered fentanyl and that he died from fentanyl toxicity. What is fentanyl? It is the strongest opioid-based painkiller on the market. It is 100 times, 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine, 50 times stronger than heroin. So it is an extremely potent drug. Now the question is how he got it. Did he have a valid prescription? If he didn't, where did it come from? All of those things is what investigators will be looking at. And law enforcement is still in the throes of this investigation, which includes the Drug Enforcement Administration and, of course, the local Carver County Sheriff's Department. They are still investigating and have not put out any details on that. But we now know what took this megastar's life, and still dozens of people have been coming out to his Paisley Park compound to say their goodbyes. This is not a shocker to a lot of people because of a lot of the things that have been coming out over time, that indeed they found, for example, pain medications on his body and in his home. But certainly this gives an end to exactly what killed Prince, and that was fentanyl toxicity. Christine, Miguel.
All right, Sarah, thank you for that. Disturbing new details about the gunman in a murder-suicide at UCLA. Authorities say Maynak Sarkar left behind a kill list. Police say he shot and killed Professor William Klug before turning the gun on himself. He is also suspected in the shooting death of his wife. Authorities say the 38-year-old Sarkar also planned to kill another professor. Officials say he had extra ammunition at his home.
Horrendous. The Independent Review Board, looking into allegations of police misconduct in Chicago, is set to meet privately today with the media. Members of the Independent Police Review Authority will be focusing on the 6 videos considered the most sensitive, and will also be releasing evidence from at least 100 other cases in the coming days. The action comes after city officials waited a year to release video of a Chicago officer gunning down a black teenager last November.
Breaking overnight, 2 military planes crashed just hours apart. The pilot of a Blue Angels jet killed during a practice run for a weekend air show in Tennessee. A Thunderbird F-16 also crashing during a flyover at the U.S. Air Force Academy commencement ceremony in Colorado. Oh, the pilot ejected safely before that plane went down.
We could learn today whether the mother of the little boy who fell into that gorilla enclosure in the Cincinnati Zoo will face criminal charges. Zoo officials beefing up security around the exhibit, which is set to reopen to the public next week. CNN's Jessica Snyder with the latest from Cincinnati.
Miguel and Christine, zoo officials say they've spent the last few days planning for modifications to that barrier that separates the visitors to the zoo from the gorilla exhibit. They say once those modifications are in place, they will reopen the Gorilla World exhibit on Tuesday. Now, they pointed out several differences in this new barrier. They say it will be about 42 inches high. That's about 6 inches higher than the 3 feet that the former barrier was. They also say it will have solid wood beams on top, as well, and this is important, as a knotted rope netting. They say that that will prevent anyone from getting through. They do say that the 3-year-old boy went under the last rail that was there that served as the barrier. Now, the zoo is saying that it's making these modifications despite the fact that the previous barrier did pass the accreditation by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and that it adhered to all safety guidelines. So once these improvements are made, they will reopen on Tuesday. Now, in the meantime, the Cincinnati Police Department has concluded its investigation, and it is now onto the prosecutor. The prosecutor said that it could be as soon as today to make a final determination as to whether or not to press criminal charges. Miguel and Christine.
All right, Jessica, thanks for that. And the police department recommended against criminal charges in that case, so we'll see what happens with that case. All right, game 1 of the NBA Finals is in the books. The defending champion Golden State Warriors now just 3 wins away from back-to-back titles. After a 104-89 victory over Cleveland last night, the Warriors led most of the way. Steph Curry only had 11 points, but the bench was strong, and the Warriors' defense held LeBron James to just 23 points. Game 2, Sunday night in Oakland.
In the battle to take back a key city from ISIS in Iraq, it is on hold for now. Why the Iraqi army is holding back as we get new video of the firefight. We're lining up next.
Fallujah, the Iraqi military releasing new video of airstrikes pounding ISIS targets. But the ground offensive to retake the city has now been halted, with more than 50,000 civilians caught in the crossfire, ISIS using many of them as human shields. Military officials in Iraq, they're struggling to come up with a plan that doesn't result in a massacre. CNN's Ben Wiedemann tracking the latest developments live from Baghdad. And Ben, from the beginning, we've been concerned about the civilians there. We've been concerned about ISIS using them as human shields. Some thousands of children there. And these reports that ISIS is threatening to execute men who don't fight for them.
Yeah, we just got off the phone with an official from UNICEF who says that as many as, basically the last 5 days, about 900 people have been coming out of Fallujah. Civilians also from the center of the city, they say that their condition is really terrible. They're described as exhausted, pale and dehydrated. Many of the children are suffering from malnutrition because of the lack of food within the city. And of course, the situation all the more complicated as the Iraqi army, it hasn't halted its military operations. It seems to have sort of halted on the edges of the town, but they continue to bombard the city with artillery. There continue to be airstrikes on ISIS targets within the city. But at this point, it's not at all clear when they're going to go into Fallujah itself. They've already run into a lot of resistance from ISIS. ISIS, of course, has been in control of Fallujah now for 2.5 years. The Iraqi army started deploying outside of Fallujah in September of last year, so ISIS has had plenty of time to dig trenches and tunnels, rig booby traps, roadside bombs, prepare for exactly this eventuality. Now, the Iraqi army, when it began this operation, declared that it was establishing humanitarian corridors for civilians to leave the city. But what we're hearing from people who have been able to flee is that ISIS set up sniping. So this is really just a unilateral humanitarian corridor. ISIS is not respecting it. As you mentioned, they are executing those who are trying to flee. They're also trying to force some of the children, the teenagers, to fight on their behalf against the Iraqi army. So very difficult, delicate, and unfortunately increasingly bloody situation.
And now a situation sort of on hold as authorities try to figure out how to proceed. Ben Wiedemann, thank you for that.
Now they are bracing for the worst in France and Germany, where deadly floodwaters continue to rise after days of torrential rain. Thousands of people near Paris are being evacuated by boat. Workers at the Louvre are scrambling to move artwork to higher ground. Look at that. It's unbelievable how much rain. At least 10 people are now dead, most of them in Germany. Forecasters expect downpours throughout the weekend. That's Paris. Unbelievable.
Honestly, moving things in the Louvre to higher ground.
Incredible.
Remarkable. Are Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton attacking each other like we have not seen before in this 2016 race? A new Hillary Clinton potentially on the stump, point by point, tearing down Donald Trump. We've got that next.
November, and he just picked up a key endorsement from Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, surprise, surprise, announcing he is voting for Trump in the fall after an awkward 3-week courtship. Awkward indeed. Meanwhile, more protests at the Trump rally in San Jose last night. American flags and Make America Great Again hats set on fire. Pro and anti-Trump demonstrators separated by riot police. More now on the bitter war of words between candidates. From CNN senior White House correspondent Jim Acosta.
Christina Miguel, in response to Hillary Clinton's fiery foreign policy speech, Donald Trump blasted right back, accusing the former Secretary of State of delivering a political address that had little to do with world affairs. In her speech, Clinton said that Trump is so dangerous he should not be allowed near the nation's nuclear codes. Trump called those jabs pathetic, and here's more of what he had to say at a speech in San Jose.
I watched Hillary today. It was pathetic. It was pathetic. It was so sad to watch. And, you know, she's up there and supposed to be a foreign policy speech. It was a political speech. Had nothing to do with foreign policy. She made a political speech tonight, folks, and it was a pretty pathetic deal.
Trump also told the crowd here in San Jose that Clinton should go to jail over her email scandal at the State Department. He did not comment on the judge handling the Trump University case, but he told the Wall Street Journal that Judge Gonzalo Curiel has a conflict of interest, he said, because of his Mexican heritage. Trump did start the event, though, here in San Jose, telling the crowd, quote, "We of the Hispanics. Christine?
Her Republican rival, calling him unfit to be anywhere near the nuclear codes, using his own words against him to show what she called an incoherent foreign policy. Now, for the former Secretary of State, this was an aggressive new persona 4 days out from the California primary. Let's get more from CNN senior political correspondent Brianna Keeler. She's in San Diego.
Good morning, Christina Miguel. This was a character speech, perhaps more than it was a foreign policy speech, a roast almost at times. Hillary Clinton eliciting boos and cheers and guffaws from this audience here in San Diego as she took aim at Donald Trump on, yes, some foreign policy, but mostly his temperament.
Now imagine Donald Trump sitting in the Situation Room, making life or death decisions on behalf of the United States. Imagine him deciding whether to send your spouses or children into battle. Imagine if he had not just his Twitter account at his disposal when he's angry, but America's entire arsenal. Do we want him making those calls? Someone thin-skinned and quick to anger who lashes out at the smallest criticism. Do we want his finger anywhere near the button?
The timing of Hillary Clinton's speech coming as Donald Trump has criticized her on foreign policy, repeatedly using the two words bad judgment to talk about her involvement in Libya, her vote on the Iraq War, and also beyond foreign policy, her handling of emails while she was Secretary of State. Christina Miguel.
Brianna Keeler, thank you very much. Bernie Sanders hoping to knock off Hillary Clinton in the California primary next week. He's campaigning hard in the battleground state, trying to flip super delegates already pledged to Clinton. Several have come over to his side this week. Sanders insisting there is still a path to the nomination for him, despite how slim it might be, and what he calls an unfair system.
The process, frankly, is absurd. Hillary Clinton won the support of over 400 superdelegates before anybody else was in the race. 8 months before the first ballot was cast in Iowa. Does that make sense to anybody?
Now, even if Sanders wins in California, Clinton is very, very likely to surpass the delegate threshold needed to win the nomination.
The State Department releasing its top terrorism sponsors, and Iran is number one. The report also lists ISIS as the greatest threat globally. There were a total of 11,774 terrorist attacks in 92 countries in 2015. Think of that, 11,000 terrorist attacks. Iran is being singled out by the State Department for providing training, equipment, financial support to a wide range of terror organizations. Secretary of State John Kerry in Paris this morning, meeting with the French foreign minister to discuss anti-ISIS operations in Iraq and Syria.
Breaking news out of flood-ravaged Texas. The bodies of two more missing Fort Hood soldiers have been found. That brings the number of casualties to 5. The soldiers were killed after their troop carrier overturned during a training exercise Thursday morning. Search teams now combing the scene for 4 more missing soldiers. Meantime, evacuations are underway in several neighborhoods. This Houston suburb here, surrounded by water. Folks there say it is the worst flooding they've ever seen.
Up to the windows. The water's just all the way up to the windows. There's cars floating down the street. Our house getting flooded. I've lived there my whole life. I don't want our house to be ruined.
It's really just shocking down there. Texas expecting more rain this weekend, a critical 3 days ahead here. Meteorologist Allison Chinchar live for us this morning from the CNN Weather Center. It just looks tough.
It does, and you can tell that when we take a look at the flood watches and warnings, because again, look, the majority of the state of Texas is still under a flood watch, a flood warning, or even flash flood warnings. And the reason for this is it's not just because of what has already fallen. That plays a part in it, but it's also what else is yet to come. Now, we have this low pressure system that's been sitting over Texas, but the problem is as it begins to shift east, you think that's a good thing. It's starting to move out. But what it does beforehand is it's able to pull up all of that warm, moist, humid Gulf air, and that really adds fuel to the fire by just putting in so much moisture into a state that's already been inundated by rain. The forecast radar again shows for today Dallas, Abilene, San Antonio, over towards Houston. Again, looking at the chance for some showers and even some thunderstorms in the forecast. Now, widespread areas, especially the eastern half of the state, could pick up about an extra inch, maybe two. But some of the areas, especially right here along the Gulf Coast, could pick up an additional 4 to 6 inches of rain. Again, this is a lot. You have to remember, this is on top of what they've already seen. Now, eventually, that system will finally make its way over a little bit farther to the east, begin to dissipate. But again, guys, we're talking not one, not two, but we've got to get all the way through the weekend before they finally get some relief in portions of Texas.
All right, Allison, thank you so much for that. Gosh, well into the weekend before there's relief.
Crazy.
All right, time for to start your money. Oil prices heading to $60 a barrel.